Hello, everyone. Welcome, one and all. This is Due Dissidence Podcast. My name is Keaton Weiss, here with Russell Dobular.
Hello.
We're doing this like we used to do in the old days. It's been a long time since we've done an episode that we have not live streamed, but we are instead premiering this Sunday night, August 21st at 7 p.m., and there will be a live chat there, so it should function somewhat as a live stream. But I am taking my first real vacation in many, many years, packing up the family, and well, actually, that's wrong. My wife Amanda's packing up the family. I'm just going, packing up the family and going to Mystic, Connecticut. So as you guys are watching this, I'll be en route back home. So we're recording this Thursday night. But thank you guys for tuning in, and we will have a live stream in just 2 days from now. We're going to be live streaming on Tuesday night as the New York primary results roll in. So we'll be starting whenever the polls close, either 7 or 8 o'clock, I think probably 8 o'clock, and we'll go for a couple hours there as results come in. We will have some New York primary stuff to talk about tonight, just as a little preview, but we should start today as most responsible, democracy-loving, constitution-loving, rule of law-loving, and waterboard loving Americans by mourning the defeat of Liz Cheney.
Oh, no, I'm not going to talk about that.
Oh, the circumcision?
Yeah.
You wanted to talk about circumcision? I was saying I think we should lead with the most important story of the night, which is, of course, the defeat of Liz Cheney.
According to the DSA, it's circumcision. At least according to the Facebook TSA page.
Oh, well,
it's the scourge of babies without their consent being circumcised. That is, honestly, folks, go to the DSA page. That's what's being talked about over there.
Well, maybe we'll talk about that on Tuesday night when the results are coming in, because they have a few candidates running. So we'll see if the decision to close on circumcision down the home stretch, if that pays off for them.
Yeah,
we'll
that actually, I mean, it could buoy the Democrats, right? Because that's an issue that most Americans are discussing around their dinner tables, and you really have to keep it on the kitchen table issues.
It's certainly a creative closing argument. I'll give them that.
It really is.
I didn't see that coming.
That's like Nixonian.
Exactly. Right. Just a trick that you pull out of nowhere. Just shiv your opponent.
Well, I don't think little baby infants should be having their foreskins removed against their will.
Right, yeah, exactly. And do the fingers in the air, exactly.
No.
Do the snip with the piece in the air.
No, you see the stuff and you go, why don't I join the Republicans again? Because I like winning. It's like being a Mets fan, being on the left. It's just it's right in the Bronx is the Yankees. It's like, why don't you go to the Yankees?
Right, exactly, right in the Bronx is the Yankees. Although the Mets are actually playing better than the Yankees.
What do you hate yourself? Like, why are you sticking with this team?
Recently, the Mets have been out playing the Yankees. I'm sorry to say.
Don't worry.
As a Yankee fan, grandfathered in.
Yeah, they'll choke. Don't worry.
I was circumcised as a boy, and medically speaking, it was fine. The only thing about me being circumcised was it caused some confusion at the hospital because I was born 7 pounds 5 ounces, and after circumcision, I was only 6 pounds 4 ounces. And people didn't know what was wrong. They're like, "Oh my God, the baby's losing weight. He's not absorbing nutrients properly, right?" And then they're like, "Oh no, wait a minute. It was the circumcision."
And then you stop being so popular with the nurses.
Exactly. Yeah. But other than that, I mean, it's been fine with no other medical issues.
It's worked out. It's worked out fine for me.
Right. Yeah, I can't complain.
I've entered it in contests. I've come in third prize a couple times.
Exactly. Yeah. All right. Well, should we talk a little bit about Liz Cheney? As I'm sure many people have seen, I was completely right when I predicted last week that the defeat of Liz Cheney would be met with one ridiculous op-ed after another. Robert Reich put out another one in The Guardian talking about how, she ought to be a role model for people entering the, political arena. Obviously, Jonathan Capehart came out with one on the eve of her defeat saying she's the Obi-Wan Kenobi
I'm working
to
on that.
Darth Vader.
I'm working on that video. I've written a lot of the text already.
Oh, excellent. I mean, yeah, the thrust of it is that even though she lost, she won because she played an honorable game. Which, I mean, all right, whatever. I mean, I have nothing to really add about that.
Yeah, if it's how you win the game, if it's not winning or losing, it's how you play the game. Why do they only talk about the winners?
Yeah, right, exactly. And the idea that she is going to run for president, because she definitely teased that out. And when people have asked her, in interviews she's done post-primary, in the last 48 hours, she has refused to commit to running or not running, which means she's thinking about running. Now, where she would run, who knows?
If she runs as a Democrat, she could win. I mean,
she
could win the primary.
Right. I mean, right, exactly. And everybody's saying, oh, no, she can never win a Democratic primary. Oh, sure she could.
Sure she could. She could as long as the K parts and I don't know, Maddow's off the show now, but the MSNBC people, the CNN people, as long as they tell them to do it, they'll do it. That is what history has shown us. They voted for Joe Biden. Who would they not vote for?
Exactly. I mean, if policy were any consideration at all.
I just saw the movie Elvis. And James O. Eastland is a character in the movie because he was in the Senate then talking about the rock and roll Negro music and how it has to be stopped. That was the guy that that was his opening argument in his campaign, how he used to be able to work with Eastland to get things done. They voted for that guy.
Right, exactly.
Who would that? So why would Cheney be a bridge too far?
Especially once Trump has the nomination locked up. Once Trump has the nomination locked up, if he does, obviously it's not a guarantee yet. But if and when he locks up the nomination, sure. Hey, she could win over moderate Republicans. She could win over the Republicans, right? I mean,
sure.
What?
Sure. I'm still saying it's going to be DeSantis, but yes, if Trump were the nominee, the shit libs would just eat that up because that at that point that would be Star Wars for them.
Right. Exactly. Well, yeah, exactly. Then that would actually work.
Send Liz Cheney against how could they resist? Especially if their media told them to do it.
Right. It's just a question of
they could Maddow could go on there and tell them to fucking slice off their index finger with a Ginsu knife and they would do it.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Who would they not? What limit do they have in degrading themselves?
No, absolutely. No, I mean, I think you're right. I mean, I don't say she would be the favorite, but anything is possible. You only have to win over a few people to win the Democratic nomination. You don't actually have to win over a lot of voters. You have to win over, I would say, like 80 to 95 key media people. You win them over, you're going to win a primary.
Well, that's what I can't remember who it was who wrote about it. He kind of let the cat out of the bag, called it the silent primary. Said there are about basically 400 people who decide who the Democratic nominee is going to be.
Right. Yeah. Well, that's what George Carlin said. George Carlin said the country's really run by 800 or 900 people. We're a country of 330 million. Basically, 800 or 900 are the ones who actually run things. Yeah. And if enough of them think, hey, Liz Cheney is who we need, then, you'll see. Everything will fall in line.
Well, that's why looking back now, it's incredibly naive how invested in Obama we became. Because the shift in that campaign between him and Hillary was the shift of him convincing that 800 or 900 people that he was a more exciting option and that he could actually win. Right. You could palpably feel that happen over the course of the campaign.
Well, not only could you feel it happen, you could see it play out in the numbers, even when he won Iowa.
In the super delegates, yeah.
Well, yeah, in the superdelegates, but even in the media and everything, even after he won Iowa, he was still considered a long shot. She comes back in New Hampshire, right? Now, when he wins South Carolina, that's when the media, all that you could see, a swing up. Mm-hmm. Wow, okay.
Right.
He's the guy now.
Right.
Same thing with Biden, right? He wins South Carolina, those few hundred people just hop on board, get right in line. Right. So anyway, speaking of some current developments this week and Democratic Party embarrassments, this has not gotten nearly the press it deserves. But this photo here is perhaps the most disgusting photograph I've seen in quite some time. This is Joe Biden a few seconds after having signed the Inflation Reduction Act into law. You could see James Clyburn there over one shoulder, Chuck Schumer over the other shoulder, and Joe Manchin here at the signing ceremony. And Joe Biden, seconds after signing the bill, hands the pen that he used to sign the bill over to Joe Manchin. A show of gratitude to the man who killed paid family leave, killed Medicare expansion, killed the child tax credit, killed universal pre-K, and so much more. The guy who ensured that 600 million acres of ocean area would be granted to fossil fuel companies, and 20 million acres of land area would be granted to fossil fuel companies as part of this so-called climate bill. Even factoring out all of the horrific policy implications of this man's bullshit that he pulled over the last year and a half. Even if you didn't care very much about that, which obviously none of these three fuckers do. You could tell by the looks on their face.
I'm actually in this photo. I'm more interested in Clyburn. He's on the side there, like rubbing his hands like Satan's crafty minion.
You're right, exactly.
You know, he's got, sign it for my master. Like you could just see the wings sprouting.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
And Chuck Schumer thinks he's going down in history now. Like,
yeah, right, exactly.
Like
he's very excited.
The putz that he is.
Very excited.
He's gonna dance a horror over there.
Even if you take out all of those policy considerations that I mentioned, this man, Joe Manchin, is the guy who, like I mentioned, killed all of these good policy ideas, but he also killed Joe Biden's presidency. Like, just from a selfish political perspective, this guy, for over a year, has dragged your poll numbers from the mid to high 50s down into the low 40s, high 30s. If Build Back Better passed in its original version, the version that Joe Biden laid out in his speech to Congress in whatever it was, late March, early April 2021, pardon me, if that version of the bill passed, which it would have, were it not for Sinema and Manchin, Joe Biden's favorability numbers would still be in the mid to high 50s. If we had universal pre-K, if we had a permanent child UBI, right? All those things I just mentioned, Medicare expansion, he would be an overwhelmingly popular president. And so this is the guy, this is the reason, Joe Manchin is the reason why 75% of Democrats want a different nominee in 2024. He's the reason why you stand no chance of being reelected.
I mean, Biden is showing his age to the point that even they can't ignore it at this point. So I think there'd still be chatter about that just because of that. But did he destroy his presidency and give him those poll numbers? Yeah. I mean, that's definitely a huge part of it. You know, I mean, if he had passed that original version, even speaking for myself, I'd have a hard time going after him if he had done that.
Hey, look, we took a ton of shit in April of last year for saying, after that speech to Congress, when Biden laid out all those points that eventually made it in the House version of the Build Back Better bill, we said, listen, we are pissed off that Joe Biden is in the White House and not Bernie. Of course, we're as pissed off as anybody about that. But let's not look a gift horse in the mouth at universal pre-K or a permanent child's UPI. Like, these are big deal items. These are not crumbs. This is not bullshit. So if he's on board to get this done, let's try and do it.
Tax credit. I mean, that would have radically transformed the economics of American families. A lot of course. That lift. I mean, we saw what happened. It lifted children out of poverty. So, yeah, I mean, we would take cracks, but not like we do now. You know, I've said all along. Some people feel like this is what Biden wanted all along. You know, corporate friendly bill. I don't agree with that. I think he wanted to go down in history. I think he wanted to be a history making president. I think he really wanted Build Back Better in its original form. I don't think he was playing games. I don't think he was hoping Manchin would pull this shit.
I'm not sure if Biden himself was hoping he would pull that shit, but I think this is the bill that the Democratic Party, this is the bill that the apparatchiks and the people who fund it, this is much more the bill they wanted than Build Back Better. And whether Biden wanted to one-up them and make a sort of history-making move by passing something bigger and more transformative, you could very well be right about that. But ultimately, at the end of the day, and I've said this a million times, but it becomes more and more evident every time I say it, Joe Biden is ultimately, at the end of the day, a company man. He does what the company wants. He is George Clooney and Up in the Air, the sad bastard who takes orders from the company, flies across the country, sits down with the workers and say, we're very sorry, but we're laying you off. And your life is going to be pretty miserable from here on out. That is who the guy is. And so whether he wanted a better bill or not, ultimately means fuck all. The fact of the matter is you can always count on Joe Biden to be the guy to sit at the desk and sign the bill that the bosses want. That's what happened. I am convinced that the powers that be, the real decision makers behind these puppets in their suits, wanted this stripped down, more pro-business, more pro-fossil fuel version of,
well, supposedly,
transformative achievement. Yeah, right. Okay.
I haven't dug into it. Supposedly, Bill Gates leaned on Manchin about this, about approving this. Like, supposedly, he was getting some shit. I mean, Bill Gates is not a natural ally for Joe Manchin, although he's pretty fucking evil behind the scenes. But yeah, a lot of these fossil fuel people actually wanted this bill as well.
Of course. Why wouldn't they?
Ultimately, I mean, it wasn't party. It was the people that Joe Manchin is actually partying with. That I
mean, if I'm the commissioner of the NFL and you give me 20 million acres to build new football stadiums, of course I'm going to want it.
Right.
You know.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And I also think at this point, this is where we're living in very strange times. I think the corporations would rather have the Democrats at this point.
Oh, there's no question.
Yeah, I mean, there's really the historic if you're going to hear any speaking out about corporate power these days, it's going to come from a Republican. You're not going to hear that from Democrats, except for Bernie Sanders. I mean, he's really the only one with any prominence who's out there talking about that. Yeah, the squad will talk about it, but as we've established, they are as useful as the asshole right there. You know.
Well, I actually have some video I can play with regard to that. Not from a squad member, but from the chair of the Progressive Caucus, Pramila Jayapal. Because one of the reasons why Manchin got that photo op is because Joe Manchin held his own for over a year and made very, very clear for over a year that I don't give a damn about the Democratic Party. I don't give a damn about Joe Biden's favorability numbers. I am not signing a bill that has stuff in it that I and my donors do not want. Period. Fuck you. Whatever happens, happens. And he drew the ire of a lot of people, not only on the left, but in liberal circles, and even on MSNBC, you had some anchors getting very angry with Manchin. Not all, but some. But at the end of the day, he gets to be the hero and stand over Joe Biden's shoulder and receive the pen after the signing of the IRA, because that's what you get. Even if you are the bastard that Joe Manchin is, you get respect by sticking to your guns no matter what for as long as it takes, which is something that Bernie Sanders obviously does not have it in him to do, which is one of the reasons why we got this bullshit bill instead of the Build Back Better bill.
And if you notice, like, yeah, man, the press quibbled a little bit about Sinema and Manchin. They did not give them anything like the treatment they would have given Bernie Sanders if he had been the one holding the bill up.
Oh,
that
of course,
shit would have been hammered every single day. Maureen Dowd's there talking about Sinema as the Greta Garbo of the Senate. While all this,
and even on MSNBC, you had Joe Scarborough defending Manchin, not really like coming out and like full-throatedly defending Manchin, but saying things like, you know, Joe Biden has gone too far left to bring over the moderates in the party, you know, which is basically a de facto defense of Manchin without coming out and saying it, right?
Right. If it had been Bernie, it would have been all, you got these people on the left. They're destroying the Biden presidency, Mika.
Right. Right. Exactly. That's the treatment that they
it would have been that every day. Every day. Yep.
Exactly.
Yep.
But Manchin stuck to his guns, and he won the respect of the entire party, including, as it seems, Pramila Jayapal. So let's watch this video here. Talk about just adding insult to injury. Talk about what a clown, what an absolute clown you have representing the so-called progressive caucus.
I've always given the president credit for coming in with a vision that was big, bold, populist, and being willing to fight for it. And I would argue that the Progressive Caucus was probably his best friend on Capitol Hill in terms of selling this to the country, pushing for it, making sure we got legislation drafted and passed in the House. Many of those pieces that are in the Inflation Reduction Act came directly from the piece of legislation we drafted in the House. And as for Senator Manchin, I think it's a great thing that he was able to get to a place where he could be comfortable with moving some of these critical issues along, and that he didn't give up. I give him a lot of credit for that. And I'm happy to have him in the Democratic family.
I'm happy to have him in the Democratic family. What a clown. What an absolute clown. What a fucking clown. What an embarrassment. What a fucking disgrace. I'm happy to have him in the Democratic family. I don't have to repeat myself. The guy who killed all those policies that I laid out. In case we clip this for YouTube in the separate segment, bear with me. I'll run it down one more time. Killed the child tax credit. Killed Medicare expansion. Killed universal pre-K. Everything in the 3.5 killed all of it. Yeah. I'm happy he could get to a place where he was comfortable. The whole progressive critique is that corporate Democrats do not just what they're comfortable with, but what the corporate donors are comfortable with. That's the whole raison d'etre of the Justice Democrats, our revolution sort of movement.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Is that we have to call out and challenge the influence of corporate power on corporate Democrats. So it's not that he came to a place where he was comfortable with it. It's that he put enough poison in this bill where his donors were comfortable with him signing off on it. And you, Pramila Jayapal, either don't know that, in which case you're a fucking moron, or you do, and you're choosing to couch it in this bullshit language, which you ought to know that your base is not going to go for. So, and at the end, we welcome him in the Democratic family. We welcome him in the Democratic family. That says it all right there.
That's MSNBC talk. That's you know that's in like Dances with Wolves that Native Americans would be like, that is the MSNBC talk of the white man. That's right. How that's coming across. See, Pramila Jayapal, you know, I'm watching that. I'm saying, this woman brushes her teeth with shit in the morning to be able to lie like that. That is just no. She doesn't believe any of that. She doesn't believe anything that she's saying.
She can't. She's too smart. She's not an idiot.
No. She's a creature of Washington, and at this point, and very few people are really comfortable seeing themselves as a villain. So, you know, she's doing the formulation in her mind that most of them do, that I'm sure Nancy Pelosi does. I'm doing the best I can within the system. It would be worse without me here. I'm here trying to fight the good fight, and I have to say this about Manchin because that's politics, and maybe I'll need him for something later. That's how she's justifying it. And really, we're past that. We're past that. We've been past that for a long time. We needed fighters. We didn't need more people like this. That's why we elected you. That's why we elected the squad. We were expecting you to go there and challenge this, not to become a part of it.
Right. Exactly. I mean, she would have been saying in 2009, we welcome Joel Lieberman into the Democratic Party, right? I mean, there's always one or two of these characters who they put up there to, hold up the good bill and eventually hold out until we get the shit bill. And, it just says a lot that, he's the guy who gets the thanks now. I mean, Joe Manchin gets a victory lap now.
Why do they care that the media is going to attack them? Don't they see that fucking Trump's poll numbers shot way up after they raided Mar-a-Lago? That is how little authority the media has with the American people. Literally, a media endorsement is poison. You should want them to hate you. Who cares? If they had gone after you every day, that would have been the best way of securing your seat for life. The people would have loved you for it. If you had held on for family leave, the people who aren't going to like it are the people who are not voting for you anyway. Those are not going to be your people. The people who voted for you, they would have loved you. And you know what? There are a fair amount of Republicans we saw from Bernie's campaign who would have liked you too if you had really stood up and fought for something. They wouldn't have lost their seats. Why? You can't take the media being mean to you? You can't take the media being mean to you. You're a fucking politician, man. Take it. The media is not your fucking constituency. And you can't even argue, well, I have to have the media on my side because otherwise I'll get voted out. No, you won't. No, you won't. DeSantis, a lot of people are saying, the media is being nice to him and it's fucking him up. That, once they saw the threat of Trump, they started being a little nicer to DeSantis, and that's not good for him.
I mean, look, there is a difference, obviously, between the Democratic and Republican bases. The Democratic base mostly trusts the media. The Republican base mostly doesn't. However, in the case of, you're right, people like Jayapal, AOC, these are very, very popular figures in their home districts.
They were.
And they're not going to lose re-election just because they get a few tough news cycles on MSNBC. That's not going to happen. But look, I think ultimately what this is more about even than that, I think this has a lot more to do with the fact that, as she said, look, she said it right there. She said it's a Democratic family. We welcome him into the Democratic family. This is the problem with electing progressive Democrats.
It reminds me of Donna Brazile running around in 2016 going, it's like at the Democratic convention. Oh, it's like Thanksgiving. You have your disagreements, but you all get together and we walked out of there unified.
Yeah. Now that you mention that,
you remember that line of shit.
Mm-hmm. When it comes down to election time, Pramila Jayapal needs the Democrats to maintain their majority in the House, because unless they maintain that majority, Jayapal has no power whatsoever. You don't have power as a minority party, and so come campaign season, which we are in right now, obviously, she has to do what she can to get the Democrats as many wins as she can. And that means getting wins for Joe Biden. That means making Joe Biden and the Democratic Party look good right now. And so when you pass a bill like this, it is in her political interest to tout this bill, whether it's worth touting or not, because she needs to pump Democratic numbers for the midterms. Otherwise, she loses all her power anyway if they lose. And that's where all this goes. All the energy just gets funneled into the party at the end of the day. And by the end of the day, I mean every 2 years. Every 2 years is the end of another day, right? You have to keep winning elections. And so there is no room to actually build on anything that could possibly transcend that goal, because if in the process you lose the House, well, now you're back to square one, right? And that's how they see it, and that's how they function. And so it's very, very difficult to overcome that. There really is no way to overcome that. I mean, we've been talking about what was the big controversy? I mean, there were quite a few of them. Oh yeah, we talked about this with the Andrew Yang stuff. That's right. We're like, okay, he's going to form a centrist party, and would it be worth supporting like Mark Cuban as a third party, even if he ran on a centrist platform? And I argued, yeah, it probably would. Not that we're going to be devoting the show to Mark Cuban's campaign if he runs forward. But that was an opportunity that I felt I had to make this point, which is that, like, look, you really want to get real. You talk to real deal leftists, anarchists, communists, right? They will tell you that electoral politics as an enterprise is bourgeois bullshit for this exact reason. Because at the end of the day, even if you elect good Democrats or good Republicans or even good forwardists or good Greens, right? Once a party amasses power, the people in that party's only interest the only interest they can really invest in is maintaining that power. Because once they lose that power, everything they're building towards just falls apart anyway. Therefore, you're always going to have this problem in politics. This is not unique to Jayapal. It's not unique to Democrats. It's not unique to Republicans. This is a function of electoral politics being an inherently bourgeois and elitist forum. Right? The real politics, these people would argue, happens on the streets and in the union halls. That's where actual politics happens. All of this voting and elections, this is all bullshit anyway. That's the real red pill. That's not an easy one to swallow, especially because the Bernie Sanders campaign got the left really involved in electoral politics because we thought we could win. But we couldn't, right? And even if we could, we'd run into a similar problem.
As part of the research I'm doing for the Capehart piece, it's been a real trip down memory lane. Because I went back, I dug up this article that was published in Paper Magazine. I can't remember the name of the author off the top of my head. But it really brought me back because this was Capehart. Some of you may remember Capehart was at the center of a controversy about whether it was actually Bernie or not in a 60s era picture that had been taken at the University of Chicago because some friends of another guy, Bruce Rappaport, claimed it was him and that he happened to look a lot like Bernie. So without any real evidence, Capehart wrote a piece just straight out claiming that the Sanders campaign had basically falsely claimed that Bernie was in this photo. And it turned out later that it actually was Bernie in the photo. And then he refused to write an op-ed following it up. This became a big kind of little scandal for a minute. And rather than apologize and say he was wrong, he basically wrote a piece saying, well, the person who actually took the photos has one memory and friends of Bruce Rappaport have another. We'll just never know. Total scumbag. But reading this article, it was very long. It really brought me back to that red pill moment because most people who supported Bernie did not come into that campaign from the radical left. Most of us came in as pretty mainstream Democrats. And basically,
here's the photo, by the way. I'm going to put the photo up on screen. Photo in question.
That's the photo, exactly. So then, look, I mean, this is pretty conclusive evidence. The photographer found the contact sheets and showed in subsequent pictures where it's clearly Bernie because it's fully front face, he's wearing that sweater. So the photographer said, what are you saying? They changed sweaters? He gave he gave the sweater to Bruce Rappaport. And even in the face of that, Jonathan Capehart would not say I was wrong.
Here's Capehart. Stop sending around this photo of, quote, Bernie Sanders.
Yep. And then his follow-up was basically a fog of war. We'll just never really know.
Well, look, if you notice, he put an update here when he was refuted. I've heard conflicting testimonies.
Right. He doesn't
from Danny
say
Lyon.
This article was incorrect.
Right. I've heard conflicting testimonies. Doesn't say this article, it turns out, was total bullshit.
Oh, yeah. If you look at the follow-up, it's even worse. Because basically he gives a paragraph to the civil rights photographer who, again, off the top of my head, I don't know his name, but he's a legendary civil rights photographer of that era. The photographer said, look, this is a contact sheet. It's numbered. There's no way this can be wrong. You see, here's Bernie here, then there's him there, then there's him there. See, it's in order, right? There's no, like a Muybridge film, right? There's no way this can be wrong. And Capehart still, most of the article, basically, he gave the photographer a paragraph, and then he just gave the rest to the friends and the ex-wife of Bruce Rappaport, who was deceased by then. That's part of why this. He was able to obfuscate it like this, and basically the overall tone of the article was, well, the people who knew Bruce Rappaport are probably right, not the tone, right? He doesn't say that, but it's the tone. Total piece of shit. But I was reading this article, and he opens up with, "Hey, look, I've never been a conspiracy theorist, but I'm starting to think the media and the DNC are really working against Bernie Sanders. Look at this story from Jonathan Capehart." It just brought me back like, oh, remember those days?
Yeah,
remember those days when you were so innocent, like, when you were getting these little light bulb moments, and you still didn't really want to believe that, because believing that was going to make you have to give up a lot of shibboleths, a lot of what you believed about everything. It was a red pill thing. It was really.
And I remember when it started for me. I mean, I always thought that Hillary Clinton was a scumbag and the people surrounding her were scumbags. So you started seeing like op-eds by her henchmen surface in the media. I didn't exactly hold that against the media, because it wasn't like Jonathan Capehart, who, claims to be this sort of neutral pundit, putting it out. It was fucking, David Brock using the New York Times or the Washington Post or wherever he posted his shit to, get his candidate's propaganda out there. So I didn't totally hold that against the media. The night that it went like this for me about the media was the night of the Iowa caucuses, 2016, where Bernie's running even with Hillary. I mean, he's doing extremely well. And CNN is acting like he's getting pummeled. They're acting still like he's got no shot. I'm like, this guy's tied with Hillary Clinton. Like, this guy who no one ever heard of 10 months ago is tied in the first contest with one of the most powerful and well-known women on earth. And you're not giving him his due here? That's like, what? That was when it started. Oh, of course.
You know what my red pill moment was? Because, I went up with my wife at the time to campaign on Super Tuesday in Massachusetts. We went and knocked on doors in Massachusetts. And this was a little scandal at the time that came up.
The bill with the precinct? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, Bill went into the precinct and was glad-handing. And so
as the votes were coming in, which is illegal. You're not allowed to campaign at a precinct.
Voters were coming in. No, you know how they
can't get within like 60 to 100 feet with a sign for a candidate.
He was in the precinct.
Right,
he was
exactly.
in the precinct.
Yep.
The Secretary of State of Massachusetts concluded the investigation by saying, well, he wasn't wearing flair, so therefore he wasn't campaigning. His face is the fucking flare. He's right. Bill Clinton. He is the flare. He's Bill Clinton. He doesn't need a Hillary button for people to figure out what he's there for.
Yeah, exactly right.
I wonder if this guy's for Sanders. Excuse me, sir. Like, what the fuck are you talking about? When I saw that they would humiliate themselves in such open fashion, that they would so completely just throw out any standards of needing to be convincing about their cheating, I turned to my wife. I said, they're not going to let them win. If they'll do that, they're just going to keep doing things like that. If they're that shameless in their cheating, they're just going to keep cheating like that. All of these Democrats are Clinton people. They're not fucking Sanders people. That's going to happen in every state.
Right. There are no referees to call balls and strikes. The referees are all bought.
That's when I realized that was my red pill moment. That was when I really saw what the Democratic Party actually was, as opposed to what I had thought it was.
All right. Well, before we wrap, we do want to tease a little bit of a New York primary preview. We are going to be back on Tuesday night as the results come in. So there are a few races that we want to tease out. We're not going to get into detail on all of them tonight, but the key races to note are the New York State Senate race in the 59th district, which is Astoria and parts of Williamsburg and Greenpoint, my old stomping ground when I lived in the city. That is a race between Kristen Gonzalez, who has the backing of DSA and the Working Families Party. She is going up against...
What's her position on circumcision?
I don't know. Maybe you can find her at a town hall. Maybe you can ambush her.
Maybe we should get her on and interview her about that.
Yeah, right, exactly.
And we'll get on the DSA member I was discussing this with.
Well, she is actually going up against, oddly enough, Elizabeth Crowley, niece of Joe Crowley, the former congressman who was ousted by AOC in 2018. And this race has sort of come down to a two-person race between Gonzalez and Crowley. Progressive commentator Nomiki Konst was a candidate for state senate in this race. She entered after the DSA and all the sort of left-wing sort of institutional backing had already gone to Gonzalez. And so she pissed a lot of people off by getting into a race where all she could really do was divide the left vote and hand the race to Crowley. She ran a very embarrassing campaign. She started doing a lot of the, like, you know, Liz Warren snake emoji shit, where she tried to get Gonzalez to sign a pact regarding like negative campaigning online, like an anti-internet bullying pledge and shit like that. Yeah. Just totally embarrassing. And she really risked permanent reputational damage if she stayed in the race and actually swung it to Crowley. So fair is fair, credit where credit's due. She ended up at the last minute doing the right thing. She dropped out the day before early voting started and endorsed Kristen Gonzalez in that race. So whether she did it because she really felt it was the right thing to do, or whether she realized she was going to kamikaze her entire career as a progressive commentator if she stayed in, who knows? Bottom line is she did the right thing. She didn't cost Gonzalez any votes at the end of the day. That's one race.
It's interesting. Nomiki Konst is like the also ran of that Bernie generation of pundits, journalists, and commentators. Like, they don't call her to be on the Hill. Like, she didn't get that. She didn't really catch the wave.
She's minor league, man. She's not that bright, honestly. I mean, I don't want to be mean, but she was talking. They were talking about when
she had a moment there on the Young Turks. She had a moment.
I mean, look, she's not dumb, but I'm saying, like, she says. She says some real head scratchers. Like, she was saying when they were censoring people for anti-vax stuff, for, like, you know, spreading vaccine misinformation, she said they should do the same thing. They should censor people in the same way for spreading misinformation about critical race theory. She actually said that people should be censored for misinformation about CRT. How are you going to censor people for misinformation about something that almost no one could define what it is? Like, there's not really an agreed upon consensus on what critical race theory actually is. How are you going to cancel people for spreading misinformation? Like, how unthought out does one opinion have to be? So she's just, she has too many moments like that where it's like, what the hell are you talking about?
Well, I mean, that should get her on MSNBC.
Yeah, perhaps she has to sell out a little bit more.
Maybe The View.
She should have endorsed Crowley if she wanted an MSNBC spot, though. She made the wrong pick.
That's true. She has to go all the way to the dark side.
Exactly right. Yeah. In New York's 12th district, which is a new district carved out in New York City, you have Jerry Nadler against Carolyn Maloney, two entrenched corporate Democrats going after each other. One will win, one will
emerge from the cage.
Exactly. We're calling that Godzilla versus Mecha Godzilla. That's what we'll be following that on Tuesday night. Obviously, we don't really have much of an investment either way there. It doesn't really matter. Who the hell cares? Right, exactly. But then the races that I am interested in and that we should be interested in are the races in New York's 17th district between Sean Patrick Maloney and Alessandra Biaggi, and the race in New York's 10th district, which is a new carved out district in Lower Manhattan. Those districts are both related, or I should say those races are both related, because as we covered a while ago on the show, Sean Patrick Maloney's district boundaries changed. He used to be my congressman. I'm in New York's 18th. The area where he lived, a village called Cold Spring, which is about 8 miles south of Beacon, New York, which is about 5 miles east of where I live, that got drawn into the 17th district. And so Sean Patrick Maloney said, well, I'm going to run in the 17th instead of the 18th, because now technically I live in the 17th. Even though he's not obligated to change, you're not obligated to live in the district that you represent. But he said, I'm going to run in the 17th because obviously he thought the 17th was more favorable to a Democrat this time around. What that meant was that Mondaire Jones had to either face Maloney in a primary, which would have been tough for Mondaire Jones, he thought, because Maloney's the chair of the DCCC. And so Mondaire Jones then decided to leave the 17th and run in New York's 10th in Lower Manhattan, where Mondaire Jones is currently losing in the polls. So Mondaire Jones is going to probably end up being the odd man out and losing his seat because Sean Patrick Maloney decided to switch districts and force Mondaire Jones out of his. Now, what's happening to Sean Patrick Maloney's home district, his real home district, the 18th, my district? We are now in the top 10 closest swing districts in the country. And according to 538, it is more likely than not that our district is going to flip red in this cycle because Maloney vacated it. Maloney used to win this district by about 10 points. It's a purple district, but because he's a purple Democrat and because he puts in a lot of work on the ground, he's built a rapport here over several cycles, he would win it fairly handily. So this went from a pretty safe Democrat keep to a swing district that now leans red. All right. So he endangered his own district to save his own ass and then forced a progressive Democrat, Mondaire Jones, out of the district where Mondaire Jones is now probably going to lose to a corporate Democrat in New York's 10th. If you had a hard time following that, we're going to have plenty of time to talk about it in more detail on Tuesday, but that's how it happened.
I said this when this first came up. On general principles, if he does win that primary, I'm donating to whatever Republican is running against him.
Yeah,
I am rooting for the Republican in that race.
Well, here's what a scumbag this guy is, right? So Alessandra Biaggi, who's running to his left in that open primary in New York's 17th, she tweeted out a sort of congratulatory message to the Democrats for passing the Inflation Reduction Act, which obviously we're not thrilled about, but, you know, these are Democrats we're talking about. She tweets out, "The Inflation Reduction Act demonstrates what Democrats can do when we're unafraid to use power and reflects the urgency created by activists and organizers who never let up. Democrats delivered cleaner energy and more affordable health care. Let's celebrate." All right, bullshit, but sort of the, like, you know, obligatory, sentiment that she had to express there. Excuse me. Sean Patrick Maloney tweets out, "Thank you, Senator Biaggi. While you were tearing down our president and other Democrats and making harder the job of holding the House, some of us were doing the hard, difficult work of creating the change you say you want. Welcome to the party. You had nothing to do with it." Now, this
says the man who voted against the Affordable Care Act.
Well, that too, yeah. This phrase here, making harder the job of holding the House, it's astounding that you would accuse her of making harder the job of holding the House when Sean Patrick Maloney, more than any other Democrat in Washington, has undermined the Democrats' chances of holding the House by abandoning his own district, turning it from a likely blue keep into a likely Republican flip.
Right.
And he's going to lecture her about undermining the Democrats' chances of holding the House. Truly astounding.
Well, he's clearly like the Dexter of politics, this guy. He's some kind of sick psychopath. We should get him together with Kamala.
Yeah, right. They could run.
They'd be quite a power couple.
Yeah. Just extraordinary. Extraordinary how you could say that after having done what you did. No. The John Patrick Maloney, it seems he's particularly shameless. I was doing some research, and you would know better. You're up there, but all the Democrats were saying, "Oh no, he has a long history of backing Republicans over Democrats in tight races, refusing to endorse Democrats in the local political scene." So this is par for the course. I mean, he's somebody who seems to just like holding office for the power and the, I guess, insider trading opportunities. As far as I can tell, he doesn't like he's a real just caricature of the amoral politician just looking to get ahead. Oh, sure. Which makes it, I mean, you mentioned this when we first covered this. Makes it all the more puzzling that he would do this because he did build a rapport with this district. He's likely to hang on and win in this district. So why would he think it's politically wise to switch districts in an environment like this? Unless he thought maybe he would lose re-election, because at that time it was looking like it was going to be more of a red wave. Yeah, than it does now. But if we look at the polls in New York's 10th district, and this is where another controversy rears its head, you have Carlino Rivera, who is either a state senator or a state assemblyman. I forget exactly who, or a city council person. I don't know. Like I said, we'll have more info on this on Tuesday as the results come in. But she was running pretty neck and neck with Yuleen New, who is actually a really interesting candidate. She's, like the lefty candidate for Medicare for all that stuff. And they were running pretty even at the top of the polls, with Mondaire Jones pretty far down. Then the New York Times intervened in this race and endorsed Dan Goldman, who apparently is a lifelong friend of the family that chaired the New York Times for 40 years? The Sulzbergers?
Six generations.
Wow. So more than I thought.
Yeah, no.
So they stepped in.
I think they founded the New York Times. The Times, I think, goes back to the mid-19th century.
Yeah, it goes back a long ways.
Yeah, it was like the golden age of newspapers.
Oh no, but he was friends with. Was he friends with Arthur Schultzberger? That's who he was friends with. Yeah. So they endorsed basically a crony.
They went to Sidwell Friends together, a very Tony elite private school in D.C.
Okay, so they've been friends for a long time, and the New York Times then endorses Dan Goldman, who now, according to the latest poll, is up. He's now in first place.
Well, apparently the Times endorsed 3 white men.
They did. They endorsed 3 white men
over candidates of color, and also they have a long-standing policy of not endorsing people, self-funding candidates, or only endorsing them with great reserve and lacerations, like when they endorsed Mike Bloomberg, they said, we don't approve of him financing his campaign. This guy's financing his campaign. He's the heir to the Levi Strauss fortune. Yeah. Yep. Yeah, he's financing his campaign. They didn't even say anything about it in the endorsement. There's absolutely no logical reason to endorse it. Nothing in his record, nothing. No. There's no real reason other than that he's connected to the family that owns the Times.
Yep. So here are their endorsements. The Times endorses Gerald Nadler.
Look at this. It looks like the fucking board at Goldman Sachs.
Yeah, right. Gerald Nadler, Sean Maloney, and Dan Goldman. We've talked about all 3 of these briefly in this episode. They don't endorse in every race. There are races where they will choose not to endorse. That's where I said they chose to intervene in this race for New York's 10th. And put over the top Dan Goldman, who, look, the thing about Lower Manhattan, we're talking about the West Village, we're talking about Soho, this is the shit lib capital of the world. This is where the New York Times endorsement
LA. It's the East Coast shit
lib. The East Coast shit lib capital of the world, yeah. If there's any place on earth where an endorsement of these kinds will happen.
Is the East Coast epicenter.
Yeah, you're probably right. All right.
The Upper West Side has to be the place. That was
if I were Jonathan Capehart, I said I've received conflicting testimony.
Brother, I campaigned for Bernie on the Upper West Side.
No, I believe you.
Hillary, she's the one who can win.
Well, that's right, because the Upper West Side is where the boomers are at. The West Village in Soho still skews a little younger, not as young as it used to because it's so expensive now.
At us. The old ladies would be screaming at us campaigning for Sanders. I would have some of these old women would look at me the way that somebody who had survived Auschwitz would look at somebody with like a swastika tattoo on their arm, like this weird mix of fear and hostility. Right. God knows what sin we were committing campaigning, especially on their home turf, for Bernie Sanders.
Yeah, no, I believe you. I've spent some time on the Upper West Side, and yes, that makes sense. That is more of a hotbed than Lower Manhattan. No, the Lower Manhattan, because there's so much money. It's not that they're it's not that they're ideologically committed to that brand of liberalism. They just have a lot of money, and the system works well enough for them, and so they're not particularly keen to upend it, and they're not keen either to admit that they don't want to upend it, so it's not like it's not something that they articulate very well. But at the end of the day, yeah, they're going to vote for the gatekeepers more than they are going to vote for the people who are going to storm the palace. But
I think something that's changed is it's harder to maintain the premise that you're on the left because you're a New York Times reading Democrat. Like, those things used to be assumed. And I think that we with our memes and our obnoxious YouTube videos and our articles, I think we have managed to sour that milk. I think it's hard for you to go and vote for this Levi heir and not realize you're a fucking shitlib. And this is why I argue for the Upper West Side, because you got enough people down there who like to think of themselves as progressive that
right.
I wouldn't say the progressive doesn't have a shot. Like you have a lot more people who voted for Bernie Sanders down there than you do uptown. That's for sure.
Sure. No, absolutely. I mean, down there is really Warrenville. That's really where the Warren.
Yeah, that's more of a yes.
You know what I mean?
That is a perfect way to put it. That is more Warren country than Hillary country.
Exactly. And so, yeah, at the end of the day, I mean, look, maybe New has a chance. I think that would be
all the New York Times reading theater people I know. They were all gaga for Warren in the last election.
Right. And they would probably vote for a Yulee New or Mondaire Jones over this Dan Goldman, right? But we'll see who turns out and what the numbers look like. Like I said, we're going to have more on this on Tuesday night as the returns come in. That should be fun. There are a lot of races that are
the
worth
whole
following.
Richie rich white man. It's just doesn't go with their whole aesthetic these days.
What's the thing? He was not a top tier. I mean, he was polling, I think, third or fourth. You had Carlina Rivera, who's a Manhattan councilwoman. I just looked it up, and New, because I believe Chinatown is part of this New York 10th also, and so they were polling very, very close. They were tied at 16 points, and they were in the lead. And Mondaire Jones was way down at 8. I think Goldman was probably in third at 10. And then the recent poll that I saw had Goldman up at 24 after the New York Times fucking comes in. Boom. All of a sudden, he's at the top, which means, like I said, I know it's a little bit tough to keep track of this, especially if you're listening on audio. And, when we are on Tuesday, we'll be able to spell this out a little better. But this race is so what the real development is going to be here, if Goldman wins, is that you're going to have Mondaire Jones lose a seat and the corporate Democrats gain a seat. So this all has to do with my former congressman, Sean Maloney, jumping ship, forcing Mondaire Jones out of the 17th into the 10th, and then losing the 10th. And now, instead of having Maloney, Jones, and perhaps Goldman, perhaps, one of the other candidates in the 10th, you're going to have a Republican in the 18th, Maloney in the 17th, and a corporate Democrat in the 10th, rather than centrist Democrat in the 18th, progressive in the 17th, and perhaps progressive in the 10th. Right. So basically, you added one R seat and one corporate Democrat seat because of Sean Patrick Maloney's move.
If I were running in that race and I would do it anyway, but it would have special force if you were a person of color. They had a debate last night. I would have slapped him with the Richie Rich label. I would have totally done a Donald Trump. I would have called him that all night. I would have only talked about his connection to the Salzburger family all night. That's it. I wouldn't have let him talk about anything else. Democrats never have the balls to do that. There's no Democrat who has the balls to really go on stage and do something like that. But they should, because in my humble political analysis, if any of them, especially being women of color, if either of them had done that to him, they'd be the nominee.
Yeah, in that part of town, that could work. I think in his district, that line
All
of attack
night
could
long,
work.
they should have just gone for him.
Right. No, I think you're right. I think you're 100% right. All righty. Well, I think that does it for this episode. Thank you guys for watching. I hope we simulated the live experience for you as best we can. But we will be back on Tuesday night. There was something that I wanted to say to the
We
patrons.
want you to know that both your hosts are fully circumcised.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. There was something I wanted to throw in, but I forget what it was. But either way, that's okay because we'll be back in 2 days. We'll be back in 2 days, and I'll have 6 days to remember what it was because we're recording this 4 days before you're seeing it. So by the time we see you again, I will
It's like
definitely remember
quantum
the thing that
physics,
I'm
man.
supposed to be remembering now. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
All right, everybody. Well, thank you very much. Patreon.com/DoDissidents, DoDissidents.substack.com. Oh, yeah, that's, I think, one of the things I wanted to say. Patrons and Substackers will have call-in access Tuesday night because you're not getting the live stream on Sunday. So we're going to open up the phone lines for you on Tuesday so that you still get that live stream call-in access that you're supposed to get once a week. We're not going to screw you out of that. Don't worry. All right, everybody. Thank you very much. Have a great evening. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. Subscribe to the audio podcast. And find us on Substack and Patreon. Thank you very much. Be safe. Be well. See you next
If
time.
you're looking for a moil, just email.
We should get some Moyles to sponsor the show now.
we really should because we talked them up quite a bit tonight.
Yeah, that
We
was.
talked up their services.
Somebody should have jumped on that.
Please clap.